Organ allocation must be fair and just. Public willingness to donate organs depends on a transparent and fair allocation system. Deceased donation is not directed to a specific individual. It is a gift to society, and what we do with the gift is a reflection of our society. We must not discriminate between patients, and we must ensure that everyone has a fair chance of receiving an organ, should they need it. Unfortunately, there are not enough organs available to transplant everybody on the waiting list, and the reality is that people die every day while waiting. Allocation policies have life and death consequences for patients, so how do we ensure the system is fair for everyone? Firstly, you do it by ensuring that allocation is transparent and accountable. There must be a set of rules to which everyone adheres, and these must be freely available for scrutiny. Ethically, the allocation process comes down to two factors that need to be balanced: justice and utility. Justice requires there to be a fair consideration of a candidate's circumstances and medical needs. The most commonly used markers for justice are time on the waiting list and medical urgency. Utility requires that we maximize the amount of benefit gained from each organ transplanted across the whole population. The most commonly used markers of benefit are the number of people and the number of life years gained from the donor. These two factors are not easy to balance. Take, for example, two patients on the kidney waiting list. If they differ solely on the basis of age, one is 14 years old and the other is 60 years old, who should get the kidney? Let's say the 14-year-old is a type 1 diabetic. Adolescents and diabetics do worse than your average patient. Let's say the 60-year-old is highly sensitized and unlikely to ever have a negative crossmatch. What if the 14-year-old has been waiting for 3 years longer? Or the kidney donor is a very old donor with hypertension. Bear in mind I have given you an example with just two patients. The waiting list for a kidney in the United States alone is almost 100,000 people. So what do we actually do when it comes to allocation? This seems a challenging problem. Well, first up come some logistical considerations. The cold ischemic time influences transplant outcomes, so traveling across the length of a country or the world with an organ and extending the cold ischemic time has consequences. Organs are therefore allocated within defined geographical areas. For some organs, size matching impacts on function. You physically can't put the heart of a 100-kilogram adult into a 3-year-old child, and vice versa. So there are accepted size discrepancies between donor and recipient for heart, liver, and lungs. Kidneys are transplanted extra anatomically, not in the place of the native kidneys, and size is not an issue. Livers of good quality can be cut down to the required size, but they can't be made bigger. Allocation is also done within blood groups. Transplantation across blood groups, although possible, is more risky. By allocating within blood groups, we also ensure that blood group O, who are universal donors, are not discriminated against. All blood groups, A, B, AB and O, can receive from blood group O, but blood group O can only ever receive from another blood group O. Next, you need to have a negative crossmatch. This requires testing the blood of the donor against the blood of the potential recipient. All patients on the waiting list have samples of their blood sent regularly to the tissue typing laboratory. If the test is positive, this means that the organ would be immediately rejected by the recipient. Only patients with a negative crossmatch can receive an organ from that particular donor. The likelihood of a negative crossmatch can be predicted beforehand from a test called the PRA, Panel Reactive Antibody. If you have a 99% PRA, that means that only 1 out of 100 donors is likely to have a negative crossmatch with you. Allocation scores can give weight to the PRA so that opportunities to transplant highly sensitized patients are not missed. All donor organs are not equal. All are needed, but some will work better than others. In our South African system, we allocate kidneys from older donors to older recipients, our age cutoff is 50, and from pediatric donors to pediatric recipients. These are the basic principles of allocation, but each organ uses a specific algorithm to allocate. For kidney allocation, systems use primarily a composite measure of time on the waiting list and closeness of HLA matching. These correlate with justice, first come, first served, and utility, the better the match, the longer the kidney will last. HLA matching is of importance in kidney allocation because kidneys are more immunogenic and therefore more likely to be rejected than other organs. The closer your HLA match to your donor, the longer the kidney will last. Everyone's ideal donor would be an identical twin. The further removed you are from the donor, the stronger the immunosuppression you will need to take, and the higher the chance of rejection in the long term. In the South African system, with our diverse population, we don't allocate based on HLA matching unless it's a perfect match. This helps to ensure that there is no racial discrimination in allocation of donors, an important consideration for our rainbow nation. Other countries rely to some degree on HLA matching, the utilitarian argument of making transplanted organs last the maximum length of time, trumping the justice argument. In the United Kingdom, there has been a large drive in deceased donor education programs to target ethnic minorities because these groups wait on average a year longer than the general population for a kidney transplant. The reasons for this is multifactorial. They have higher rates of hypertension and diabetes and kidney disease, but they also have a much lower deceased donation consent rate. For organs other than the kidney, time on the waiting list is not a good way to differentiate patients. For other organs, there are no long-term treatment options like dialysis. For organs such as heart, liver and lungs, medical urgency is more heavily weighted. The sickest patient is transplanted first. If there is a tie, then it comes down to other factors such as time on the waiting list or anticipated cold ischemic time. Allocation of hearts classify patients as status 1 or status 2. Status 1 means the patient is on some form of continuous mechanical support or a continuous infusion of medication to support the heart. Allocation of adult livers is based on the MELD score, comprised of bilirubin, creatinine and INR, as this correlates with expected mortality. Additional points are given over time to patients with liver malignancies who can be cured with a transplant, as these patients often have preserved liver and renal function. Lungs use the lung allocation score. This is comprised of a waiting list urgency measure, that is the number of expected days a candidate will live without a transplant, and a post-transplant survival measure, which is the expected number of days a candidate will live if they do receive a transplant. As you can see, organ allocation is quite complicated and not easy, but as long as the rules are agreed upon and are there for everyone to see, we can have a system that can be held accountable. Each country has their own organ allocation system. The United States is the largest transplant program in the world, and organ allocation is governed by UNOS, the United Network of Organ Sharing, which periodically reviews and refines their system. In South Africa, we have a much smaller transplant program. Organs are allocated on a national basis for urgent heart, liver and lung requests, but if there is no urgent national call, then organs are allocated locally. Kidneys are always allocated to recipients from the province of the donor, and because we have no formal remuneration system for the donor hospital, one kidney gets allocated to the top of the donor hospital's waiting list, while the other gets allocated to the top patient on the provincial waiting list, which is a combined public and private list. To recap, great effort is taken to ensure organ allocation is fair and accountable. These are life and death decisions for patients because we are not able to transplant an organ to everyone who needs one.